Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Please drop a like or comment if you want to help the channel. Now let's get into the true scary stories. Reflections of Fear. I woke up suddenly, my heart pounding, the familiar weight of my blanket now feeling like a suffocating shroud. My room was silent, unnervingly so, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. I shifted under the covers, blinking against the darkness. Something was wrong. My skin prickled with an uneasy sensation, the kind that makes your body stiffen before your mind catches up. As I sat up, trying to shake off the lingering grip of a nightmare I couldn't quite remember, my eyes adjusted to the shadows, and I froze. They were everywhere. Motionless, standing at the edges of my room, pressed against the walls, blocking the door, even huddled near the foot of my bed. They were staring at me. The darkness made it difficult to make out details, but I knew what I was looking at. I didn't want to believe it, but there was no mistaking it. They were me. Identical copies of myself stood around the room, their eyes dull and lifeless, their expressions vacant, as if they were waiting for something. None of them moved. I could feel their gaze boring into me, though their faces remained eerily blank. The only thing separating me from them was that fragile line between life and whatever they were. What the hell? I whispered, but my voice sounded small, almost swallowed by the thick, unnatural silence. I slowly slid out of bed, my legs trembling as I approached one of them. My own face stared back at me, the same sharp nose, the same unruly hair, the same eyes. But those eyes were empty, soulless, like glass marbles in a dead mannequin. I took a step back, my breath quickening. What was this? A dream? Had I fallen asleep in some twisted version of my own nightmare? No, this felt too real, too vivid. My chest tightened as I scanned the room, counting the figures. There were at least 10 of them, and each one mirrored my posture, as though they had once lived inside me and only now had emerged from the shadows. Say something. I shouted, my voice cracking. Who are you? None of them responded, of course. They just stood there, unblinking, like a grotesque display of forgotten marionettes. For the first time in my life, I had no idea what to do. I backed up until my legs hit the edge of my bed, but the sensation of helplessness didn't go away. If I ran, would they follow? If I screamed, would they scream back? A low creaking noise echoed from the corner of the room, and slowly, one of the figures turned its head. My own face twisted into something unreadable, its lips twitching. Then, in a voice too soft to be mine, it spoke. You don't belong here. Hey. Subscribe for more true scary stories. The words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. You don't belong here. The voice, though soft, had a strange reverberation to it, like the echo of a distant scream bouncing off hollow walls. I stood there, rooted in place, my heart hammering in my chest, unable to tear my eyes away from the one copy that had moved. Slowly, the others turned to face me as well, their heads swiveling unnaturally, one by one, until every single version of me stared directly at my trembling form. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the bedpost, my mind racing for answers. What do you mean? I shouted, but my voice came out more like a plea. The figure didn't respond at first, its lips still parted slightly, as though frozen in mid-sentence. The rest of them were silent, their gaze unwavering, waiting for something. It felt like they were all holding their breath, except none of them were breathing. I lunged for the light switch, slamming my hand against it. The room flooded with harsh light, illuminating every twisted detail. They were identical to me in every way, except for their eyes. Those eyes weren't mine. They were black, bottomless pits, swirling with something ancient, something malevolent. I recoiled, my stomach lurching. This can't be real, I muttered to myself, backing up against the wall. My body was betraying me, shaking violently as panic clawed its way through my veins. The one that had spoken stepped forward, and with its movement, a low murmur filled the room. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from within them. Leave. Now, the figure hissed, its voice layered with what sounded like dozens of whispers, all overlapping, creating a discordant harmony of voices. my stomach twisted. I couldn't move, my legs felt paralyzed, locked in place by terror. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get as far away as possible, but I knew, somehow, I knew there was no escape. Not from this. Where would I go? I asked, my voice barely more than a shaky breath. The figure cocked its head slightly, almost in amusement, before it smiled. My smile, but warped. "This isn't your world anymore," it whispered. "You crossed over. You shouldn't have come back." "I never left." I protested, my voice rising with desperation. "This is my room, my life. Whatever this is, it's not real. You're not real." I tried to convince myself, but the words sounded hollow, even to me. The murmuring grew louder. The others began to move now, slow, deliberate, circling me like vultures. I could hear their footsteps, a dull, rhythmic echo against the hardwood floor. They weren't human. They couldn't be. "Your time is up," one of them said, a voice that sounded more like a distant memory than anything living. "We've come to collect what was left behind." Before I could react, the first figure lunged toward me, its hand reaching out, cold and skeletal despite its human appearance. I screamed and turned, running blindly for the door, slamming into it with all my weight. My fingers fumbled with the handle, but no matter how hard I pulled, it wouldn't budge. I was trapped, surrounded by my own soulless doppelgangers. Behind me, the whispers intensified, the air growing thick with dread. Then I felt it, a sharp, icy touch on the back of my neck, like death's breath. Slowly, I turned my head. The figure's face was inches from mine, its eyes now swirling with an abyssal hunger. "You can't run from yourself," it said softly, lips twisting into a cruel grin. I slammed my fist against the door, pounding in vain as the whispers crawled up my spine like invisible hands. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in around me, trapping me with these things. My copies. I couldn't breathe, my chest tightening with panic. The figure closest to me, the one who had spoken, inched closer, its grin widening into something grotesque, something that didn't belong on a human face. I spun around, my back pressed against the door, trying to put some distance between us. My heart pounded in my ears as I scanned the room for anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes landed on the dresser, where an old, cracked mirror stood propped up against the wall. Its surface was jagged, splintered from a long-forgotten accident. Desperation seized me, and without thinking, I bolted toward it, knocking the mirror from its place. It shattered on the floor, the pieces scattering like fragments of a broken memory. The copies flinched. For the first time, they reacted to something. They recoiled, just slightly, their blank faces twitching with a brief flicker of recognition, or was it fear? My breath hitched. The mirror. I didn't have time to think. I snatched a large shard of glass from the floor, holding it up between myself and the advancing figures. "Stay back," I shouted, though I wasn't sure if it would do anything. The figures paused, their movements halting as they eyed the broken piece of the mirror. Their hesitation gave me a sliver of hope, but that hope quickly crumbled when the one closest to me spoke again. "You can't hide from what you are," it whispered, its voice dripping with malice. It took a step forward, ignoring the glass I held. The others followed, closing in around me, their movements slow but inevitable. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, like a chorus of forgotten voices trying to pull me under. I swung the shard of glass wildly, trying to keep them at bay, but they didn't flinch this time. The figure nearest to me reached out, its fingers curling around my wrist with an iron grip. Its touch was ice cold, burning like frostbite as it tightened its hold. "You can't run from this," it said, its black eyes boring into mine. "You are already one of us." "No!" I cried, struggling to pull free, but the grip was unrelenting. The others moved closer, their hands reaching out, cold fingers brushing against my skin, pulling me toward them. My reflection, no, my prison, loomed over me, and I could feel something pulling at the edges of my mind, something dark and insidious, trying to take hold. The figure grinned again, its mouth stretching unnaturally wide. "The mirror shows the truth. You belong here. You always have. The truth. My mind raced, flashes of memories I had long buried bubbling to the surface. The accident. The mirror breaking. A moment in time I had tried to forget, to push away as if it never happened. But it had. And now, it seemed, it had come back to claim me. That's not true, I whispered, though doubt gnawed at me. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, a deep chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. I'm not like you. I'm not. The figure's smile faltered, just for a moment, and in that brief flicker of doubt, I saw my chance. With a surge of desperation, I thrust the shard of glass forward, aiming for the figure's chest. It gasped, a low, guttural sound, as the glass pierced its skin, if it even had skin. The figure staggered back, and I yanked the glass free, watching in horror as black ichor oozed from the wound. The others froze, their eyes wide, the whispers falling silent. For a moment, I thought I had one. But then, from the depths of the wound, something dark and writhing began to emerge. A shape, twisted and grotesque, crawled out from the copy's chest, unfolding itself like a nightmare made flesh. I stumbled back, dropping the shard. My heart pounded in my throat as the thing, whatever it was, turned its hollow gaze on me. The others stepped back, giving it space, as if they, too, were afraid of what had been unleashed. You thought you could escape, the creature hissed, its voice a cacophony of whispers. But you were always meant to be mine. The creature unfolded itself from the body of my copy, its form grotesque and twisted, defying logic. Its limbs were long and gnarled, bending in impossible directions as it crawled toward me, eyes empty but full of dark intent. The room felt like it was collapsing around me, the air thick and suffocating, pressing against my skin as though the walls themselves were watching, waiting for me to succumb. The copies of myself backed away from the creature, their movements jerky and unnatural, but they didn't leave. They stayed close, like silent witnesses, their expressions unchanged. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment, waiting for whatever it was to emerge. I scrambled backward, my hands shaking as I reached for another shard of glass, but I knew deep down it wouldn't help. This thing, this monster, wasn't made of flesh. It was something older, something darker, and it had been hiding in the reflection all along. You never left, the creature hissed, its voice scraping against my mind like nails on a chalkboard. You've been here since the mirror broke. No. I muttered, shaking my head violently, trying to drown out its voice. But the memories came rushing back, the accident, the shattered glass, and the split-second moment when I saw something wrong in the reflection before it broke. Had I crossed over then? Had I been living in some kind of mirror world this whole time? The creature grinned, sensing my realization. You belong to the mirror now, it whispered, its black, twisted fingers reaching for me. You never should have turned your back on what you saw. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat felt tight, the air thick with the creature's presence. My legs were frozen, paralyzed with fear as it crawled closer, its breath a cold, foul wind against my face. Let me go, I begged, but the words felt weak, hollow. The creature's eyes, those swirling black pits, held me captive, pulling me deeper into its gaze. You are mine, it said, and with a flick of its long, jagged fingers, the room around me shifted. The walls warped, stretching and bending as though made of liquid. The floor rippled beneath me, and suddenly, I was no longer in my bedroom. I stood in a vast, empty space, surrounded by nothing but mirrors. Endless reflections of myself stared back at me from every angle, each one slightly off, slightly wrong. Their faces twisted, their mouths curling into grins that didn't belong on my face. I spun around, searching for an escape, but there was none. Just me, surrounded by infinite versions of myself, each one more monstrous than the last. The creature loomed behind me, its shadow stretching across the endless reflections. This is your world now, it hissed, its voice echoing through the glass. You are trapped here. With them. I turned, desperate, clutching the shard of glass in my hand like a lifeline. No! I screamed, slashing wildly at the mirrors around me. But with each swing, the glass only splintered and multiplied, creating more reflections, more versions of myself. There was no way out. The creature moved closer, its twisted smile growing wider. "You should never have tried to fight it," it said, its voice dripping with cruel satisfaction. "The moment you looked into the broken mirror, you became part of it." I backed away, my heart racing, panic clawing at my insides. My mind raced, trying to think of something, anything, to escape. But deep down, I knew it was over. The mirror had claimed me. I was trapped in its world, doomed to wander the reflections forever, with nothing but my own twisted copies for company. As the creature reached for me, I felt the cold glass press against my skin, and in that final moment, I saw the truth. I had never woken up. The night the mirror shattered, I had crossed into this world, and I had been living a lie ever since. My room, my life, it had all been a reflection, a cruel, distorted echo of the real world. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was my own face, smiling back at me from the other side of the glass. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Echo's Whisper. The first time it happened, I thought I was hearing things. It was late, well past midnight, and I was alone in my apartment. The TV was off, and the only sound was the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth when I heard it, my own voice, faintly echoing back at me. "Good night," I said absent-mindedly to myself, more out of habit than anything else. To my surprise, my voice echoed back from the hallway, not the bathroom. At first, I laughed. Who wouldn't? It sounded like a weird acoustical trick, nothing more. I rinsed my mouth, switched off the bathroom light, and walked towards my bedroom. But there it was again, my voice, faint, distorted, repeating, "Good night." I froze, standing in the middle of the dark hallway, feeling a sudden chill crawl up my spine. "Hello?" I called, this time purposefully. I waited, expecting silence. But the echo came back again, faintly mimicking my voice. "Hello," it whispered, dragging the word unnervingly. I shook my head, brushing it off as my tired mind playing tricks. Still, I hurried into bed, pulling the covers tightly around me. The next day, I didn't think much of it, dismissing the incident as a coincidence. But the next night, as I stood in the same spot brushing my teeth, I heard it again, this time before I spoke. It whispered from the hallway. "Good night," it said, as if it had been waiting for me. My stomach twisted. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, trying to convince myself it was just the old pipes or a draft. But it wasn't. Nervously, I tried to confront it, stepping into the hallway where the voice had come from. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice firmer than I felt. Silence greeted me. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then, from behind me, the echo replied, soft, eerie, too close. "Who's there?" it repeated in a tone that mimicked mine, but felt wrong. I spun around, heart pounding. There was nothing, no one. Just the empty hallway, dimly lit by the soft glow of a nearby street lamp leaking through the curtains. I took a shaky breath and backed away, returning to my room, leaving the door slightly ajar. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The third night, I tried something different. I said nothing, not a word, as I went through my nightly routine. But still, the echo came. It whispered from the corners of the room, from beneath the floorboards, from the air itself. This time, it didn't repeat me. It said things I didn't want to hear. "It's watching you," it whispered, so softly I almost missed it. I snapped my head up, staring into the darkness. My heart pounded against my ribs, and my mouth went dry. "What do you want?" I whispered, not expecting an answer. But the echo had grown bolder now. It spoke, calmly, confidently. "It's already here." I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, clutching the blankets, eyes darting across the room, scanning every corner. My apartment felt different, like something unseen was watching me, waiting. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, but but I couldn't shake the growing sense of dread curling inside me like smoke. The echo's words replayed in my mind, over and over, "It's already here." The next morning, the sun did little to comfort me. Every creak, every whisper of wind outside my window felt sinister. I called my best friend, Rachel, hoping her voice would ground me. "You sound off," she said. "Are you okay?" I hesitated. How could I explain this without sounding insane? "It's nothing," I lied. "Just haven't been sleeping well." She laughed softly, clearly trying to lighten the mood. "Overworked again? You're always burning yourself out. Maybe a weekend away would help." I forced a laugh in return, but the words felt hollow. A vacation wouldn't fix this. Something was wrong with my apartment, something I couldn't run from. That night, I tried to avoid the bathroom mirror, but when I brushed my teeth, I couldn't help glancing at my reflection, waiting. My reflection stared back, wide-eyed, tense. This time, I didn't say anything aloud. I didn't want to hear what the echo might say. But it didn't matter, because it started speaking anyway. From the shadows, its voice crept forward like a cold hand wrapping around my throat. "Why are you afraid?" it whispered. My mouth went dry, and I clutched the sink, my knuckles turning white. "Leave me alone," I muttered, as if it could hear reason. The echo, however, wasn't interested in bargaining. "You let it in," it hissed. "And now it's watching." My breath quickened as I backed out of the bathroom, heart hammering in my chest. I nearly tripped over myself, slamming the door shut behind me. But even then, I could still hear it, faintly. It wasn't in my head anymore, it was everywhere in the apartment. "You let it in," the echo repeated, over and over, as if taunting me, reminding me of some unspoken truth. That was when I saw them, eyes in the shadows, just beyond the doorframe of my bedroom. At first, I thought it was a trick of the dim light, but as I squinted, they blinked. Two small, glowing eyes, barely visible, like they were hiding just beneath the surface of reality. I stepped backwards slowly, my heart pounding in my ears. The room was cold, unnaturally so, and with every step I took, the air grew heavier. I turned on every light in the house. Every room. Every corner. But it didn't help. The eyes were gone, but the feeling lingered. It wasn't just a presence anymore, it was something else, something alive. The echo wasn't just repeating what I said, it was communicating. And whatever I had let in was no longer content to stay hidden. I tried to sleep, but even with the lights on, I could hear the faint whispers crawling through the walls, slipping beneath the door, brushing against my skin. "You let it in," they murmured. "It's waiting." I barely made it through the next day. My hands shook as I tried to focus on work, but every little noise, every creak, every click, made me jump. By now, I was convinced something was inside my apartment. Something I couldn't see, but could definitely feel. And worst of all, I had no idea how to stop it. The echo's voice replayed in my mind like a sinister mantra, "You let it in." I called Rachel again, hoping for some semblance of normalcy, but she picked up on my anxiety instantly. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. I hesitated. "Ratch, I think something's in my apartment." There was a long pause. "What do you mean, something?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know. It's like my echo, it's talking back, but it's saying things I never said. And now, I keep hearing whispers, seeing things in the shadows. I don't know how to explain it." I waited for her to laugh, to tell me I was being ridiculous. But instead, her voice lowered. That doesn't sound good," she said carefully. "Maybe you should come stay with me for a few days. Just to clear your head." I wanted to say yes, to leave everything behind and pretend this wasn't happening. But something inside me resisted, as if leaving the apartment would somehow make it worse. "I don't know," I muttered. "I feel like I can't leave until I figure this out." Rachel sighed, clearly worried. "Just be careful, okay? And call me if anything else happens. Don't try to deal with it alone." That night, the apartment felt like a tomb. Every light was on, every door locked, but I still felt trapped. I sat in my living room, staring at the blank TV screen, trying to distract myself, but the quiet was unbearable. The echo hadn't spoken all evening, and that made me more nervous than hearing it. It was like the calm before the storm. And then, at 3:33 a.m., the voice came back. But this time, it didn't echo me. It spoke clearly, directly. "Why won't you look beneath?" it whispered from the shadows. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. "Beneath what?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Silence. I stood up slowly, heart pounding, scanning the room. And then it came again, more insistent, "Look beneath." I had no idea what it meant, but the command reverberated inside me, compelling me. With shaking hands, I crouched down in the living room, lifting the corner of the rug. There was nothing there, just the wooden floorboards, worn and cracked. I almost laughed at how absurd it felt, but then, my fingers brushed against something. A tiny gap between two floorboards. My breath caught in my throat. I hesitated, but the whisper grew louder. "Beneath," it urged, a hiss that felt like it came from all around me. Slowly, I wedged my fingers between the boards and pulled. The wood groaned as it came free, revealing a small, dark hole underneath. It looked too small for anything significant to be hiding, but the echo's voice was relentless now, louder, more urgent. "Look beneath." With a deep breath, I reached inside. My hand brushed something cold, and I recoiled instinctively. But I couldn't stop now. I reached again, gripping the object and pulling it out. It was an old, rusted key, heavy in my palm. As I stared at it, the echo's voice returned, low and menacing. "Now you see." The lights flickered violently, and suddenly, the apartment plunged into darkness. I stood there, paralyzed, clutching the rusted key in my hand. The apartment had fallen into a suffocating darkness, and the air felt thick, heavy, almost alive. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound deafening in the oppressive silence. The key's weight was unnerving, as if it carried something far worse than its rusty exterior suggested. My fingers trembled, and the echo's words lingered in my mind. "Now you see." I fumbled for my phone, using its weak light to cut through the darkness. My instincts screamed to run, to get out of the apartment, but something stronger, something darker, kept me rooted in place. I felt a presence looming, waiting for me to understand. The key. It had to open something. But what? My breath hitched as I turned, scanning the walls and floors, trying to figure it out. And then, I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, where there should have only been a wall, stood a door. A door I had never seen before. I blinked, my heart racing. That door wasn't supposed to be there. I had lived in this apartment for years, and I knew every inch of it. This door, old and rotting, covered in scratches as if something had been clawing to get in, or out, had simply appeared. The key in my hand felt colder now, almost as if it were pulling me toward the door. My mind screamed to stay away, but my feet moved on their own. Step by step, I approached, the sound of my echo returning, whispering in the dark, "Open it." I reached the door, my hand trembling as I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a sickening click, the sound echoing in the silence. My breath quickened, my pulse hammering in my ears. Slowly, I pushed the door open. The stench of decay hit me immediately, thick, pungent, like something had been rotting for years. Inside, the room was small and empty, save for a large mirror at the far end. Its glass was cracked, warped, as if it had witnessed something unspeakable. My reflection stared back at me, but something was wrong. I wasn't moving, yet the reflection smiled. The corners of its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, its eyes cold and black. My stomach lurched. I took a step back, but my reflection didn't. It stood there, grinning, watching me. And then, it spoke. "You shouldn't have looked," it hissed. The voice wasn't mine. It was low, guttural, filled with malice. "You let it in, and now, it's yours." I stumbled backward, my chest tight with terror. My reflection's smile widened even further, the skin around its mouth tearing, blood oozing from the corners. The thing in the mirror leaned forward, pressing its hands against the glass as if trying to push through. "It's hungry," it whispered, its eyes gleaming with a sickening hunger. Panicking, I slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. I could still hear it on the other side, scratching, whispering, laughing. The echo's voice rang through my ears, louder than ever, mocking me. "You opened the door, and now, it can't be closed." I backed away, clutching the key, feeling the weight of what I had done pressing down on me like a heavy fog. The apartment was no longer just a home. It was a prison, and I had let something in. Something that would never leave. From behind the door, the whispers grew louder, sharper, and then silence. I stood there, breathing hard, heart pounding in my chest. The air felt wrong, thick, oppressive. The door creaked, slowly swinging open on its own. Inside the mirror, the reflection was gone. But something else stood in its place. The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.